Okay, and we kind of go through this different every week. This week I'm going to do it quite a bit differently. We're still going to do the same thing in that I'm going to have you go ahead and type in an unhealthy emotion from the last couple of weeks and just send it to Brent. So you can start doing that right now if you want. But in particular, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about a situation where you got upset with somebody because of something they did, or you got angry with somebody because of something they did. I would like you to think about it from those terms. In other words, this week, I would like to move in a direction where, as opposed to saying things like, well, my emotion was I was anxious, maybe because you're taking some classes and you're worried you're not going to get a good grade, and that'll cause you a career problem or something. That would be what I would call like an individual or a personal kind of circumstance that would cause the emotion of anxiety. However, there's also what I would call relational circumstances. And this week what I'd like you to do is I would like you to think about a relational circumstance where there might have been anxiety or jealousy or anger or frustration or any of the kind of unhealthy emotions we've talked about before, or that are kind of documented in the Galatians 5 verses we've talked about. So if you would think about it from that perspective, that would help. And we're going to write those down here in a minute. We may or may not come back to the 4 steps, but this is where they would be as you're kind of typing those in. Again, we're looking for an unhealthy emotion, and then we're looking for the thought that you were thinking that was causing that unhealthy emotion. So I will give you an example. Let's say that my kid, we talked about this last week with the kids getting bad grades. So the circumstance could be that one of our child gets bad grade, and so my emotion is anger or frustration, and my thought is my kid should not have got an F or something like that. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. I'm calling it relational because there's more than one person in this particular circumstance that's causing the emotion and the thought. So if you'll go ahead and do that, that would be great. And then in the meantime, these steps here that we go through, and again, we may not come back to these tonight, but the first thing we do is exactly what we're doing. We identify the unhealthy emotion. And then the second thing we do is we identify our thought. And that's what I'm asking you to do now. And then the third thing we do is we identify what is actually true, where we move this thought into something that's true, because this thought has to be something that's connected with something that's not true. Why? Because it's creating an emotion that's not healthy. And things like rage and anger and anxiety and strife and all these things, as we know in Galatians 5:22 and 23, those aren't coming from God. Here they are, a bunch of them anyways. There's a whole list, and I'm sure it's not a comprehensive list. Immorality, impurity, sensuality, outbursts of anger, dissensions, factions, envy. These are deeds of the flesh. They're not coming from God, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience. And so we know these thoughts can't be coming from God's truth, these thoughts up here, and that's why we move them down to here to focus on God's truth. And then fourth step is renew. And in particular, an example of that, of course, is in Romans 12, where it says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove the will of God is that which is good and acceptable and perfect." So we see this connection between the way we think and how we are transformed. One thing I will note on here that I don't know if I've mentioned before is it says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And I'm highlighting the word "be" there for a reason, and that is this. This is a passive comment, a passive phrase. It's in the passive tense. It's not in the active tense. Another way of saying this would be, do not be conformed to this world. Instead of saying, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, another way of saying this would be, let God transform you by the renewing of your mind. It's passive. So it's a process of God transforming you by you renewing your mind. Because when you renew your mind on something that's true, on truth, on God's truth, it's God that's transforming you. You're not renewing yourself. And here's a really good example of how in Scripture it confirms the fact that this isn't you changing you. This is the truth of God transforming you. So it's let God transform you, or allow God to transform you by renewing your mind. Okay, so now we're going to head into this next section here. Brent, have we gotten anybody's emotions?
Yeah, we've got a few here. The first one would be, I've got resentment.
Okay.
And that comes, it says that the person that I work with repeatedly makes my job harder by not doing their job, or makes more work for me because they don't do their job. Probably makes my job harder.
Coworker doesn't do their job, thus makes my work. Sorry about that. That isn't a word. That is Chinese. Makes my work harder. Okay.
I've got another one, and I'm not sure how to put it. The word was betrayal, but how would you put that for the emotion?
Well, that is the emotion.
Just saying feeling betrayed?
Yep.
Okay, I was looking at that as the feeling betrayed was more the action. And what we have on that one is, let's see, it was because, I'm looking here, going back down through it. Sorry, someone was typing in what are the winning lottery ticket numbers for this Saturday.
Oh.
I am unable to trust my spouse.
Okay. I can't trust my spouse. Okay. Do you have one more? We'll just stop with 3 tonight.
Yeah, I've only got 2. I need one more. Someone throw one at me here. Okay, here we go. Fear.
Okay.
If I tell my friends my mistake, they will no longer like me.
Okay, very good. Now, here's what I want to do, and there is something similar with all of these, and in that they are all connected to someone else. They're not emotions that are coming from things that you're thinking personally. They're things that are coming because there's someone else involved in the context of the circumstance surrounding the emotion and the thought. Now, what we've been doing for the last couple weeks is we've been going through this process, and we've been then taking these emotions and we've been saying, okay, here's the thought, so that thought is step 2 right here, and then what we do is we spend time moving to step 3, and we look at an emotion like coworker doesn't do their job, makes my work harder, or I can't trust my spouse, or my friends won't like me if I tell them my mistake. We look at things like this and we break it down using those 4 steps, and we go over to the 4-step download and we look for the lie that's behind it. So for instance, my friends won't like me if I tell them my mistake. This would be a fortune-telling distortion. And here we go. I'll do this real quick. This is just quick review, bring us up to date, make sure we're all on the same page because I'm going to head in a different direction here in a minute. And I want us all kind of connected. And so, as we've talked about before, our thoughts create our emotions, and our emotions create our actions. And so, excuse me guys, here on this one, our emotion is fear, and then our thought is, my friends won't like me if I tell them my mistake. So here, won't like me. But, as you know, this distortion, this lie, is based on a fortune-telling. This is predicting the future or fortune-telling, which we can't do, but the enemy likes to make us think we do. And then out of this fear, we would then act. So a very common thing to do is if I don't think you'll like me because of the mistake I made, then out of that fear, there's an act that comes out of it. And many times this action, Well, then it would make sense that this action would be something that would be destructive. What do I mean by that? Well, for instance, there was one time that my son, he lied to me. And, well, there's probably been more times than that, but there's one particular time I'm thinking about. He lied to me, and I asked him, I said, well, what is it that you were feeling that caused you to lie? And he said, I was afraid, right there. And I said, well, why is it that you were afraid? He goes, because I thought you were going to be mad at me, right there. And so you see a natural result of thinking my friends won't like me if I tell them my mistake would be to be afraid. That emotions would come out of that, and then out of that would be the lie. You would just literally lie to somebody. You wouldn't tell them something that you should have told them, or you tell them something that's just not true, or or you do like a lot of us do, and I would probably be included in this category. We sometimes do manipulative things like taint the truth, spin the truth. Oh, it's not quite a lie, but it's kind of not quite true either. And that way we can say we told the truth without really telling the truth. Either way, it's all ugly. So, and then we talked about one last thing here. But this thought here, which is they won't like me if I tell them my mistake, is based on a belief that's even deeper. And usually we spend time going through all this. I'm just going through it very quickly right now. But anytime we think or have a belief system, anytime we have a belief system that says my worth or my value somehow equals what my friends think of me, that belief system moves us to this lie, because this lie comes up because we are sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, they won't like me if I make a mistake. Well, why would you think that? Well, you think that, why that comes into your mind is because you're connecting your worth with what your friends think of you. That's the belief system that's causing these thoughts to come slamming into your head, causing you to move into the distortion of fortune telling, moving your emotions into fear, and then moving your fear into the action, which is next, which commonly is lying. Okay? So you see how this whole thing works. Now, we could spend time trying to religiously get you to stop this action, and we could try to punish you or something, or we could try to condemn you or guilt you into acting a different way. However, what we talk about doing is going clear back to here, because if we can change the belief system, then it changes the thought, changes the emotion, changes the action. And this belief or this paradigm is a paradigm that has to be based on God's truth. And so the truth in this situation would be that my worth and my value have nothing to do with what my friends think. In fact, the God of the universe that's in me has declared me righteous, has declared my worth infinite. Whether my friends think good of me or whether my friends think bad of me is irrelevant. And in, for instance, Galatians 1:10, we'll go to that real quick. In the New American Standard it says, "For I am now seeking the favor of men or of God?" ? Or am I striving to please men? If I were still striving to please men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. So language like this shows us exactly what we're talking about here. Look, Paul's saying, I don't really care if my friends favor me or not. I don't report to them, I report to God. And let's see what the message says about this, out of curiosity. I like this. Do you think I speak this strongly in order, this is a paraphrase from Eugene Peterson. Do you think I speak this strongly in order to manipulate crowds or curry favor with God or get popular applause? If my goal was popularity, I wouldn't bother being Christ's slave. That's pretty strong. Mm-hmm. Okay, so anyways, you get the gist. Now we've done this, again, we've done this week after week after week for quite a while now, and I've kind of flown through this, but you get the gist of that. But here, what I want to do tonight is I want to take things one step further. Because here's what we're talking about. We're talking about this idea that your emotional life is coming from what you're thinking. Okay, now, this is offensive to some people. Okay? And so this week, I got an email from somebody that wasn't very happy with me. It was nobody on the line. Nobody in this webinar. Frankly, I don't think this person has ever read any of the books I've written. I don't think he really understands what we do. But anyways, he was on the attack. But what it did was, it was, you know, it was wonderful. I responded to him, and I still think he thinks I'm nuts. But I loved the engagement. I totally enjoyed his thought process. And the reason I want to bring it up tonight is because I think it's natural for us to maybe think some of the things he was thinking. And so I want to mention that. So anyways, that's where we're headed tonight. We're headed to an attack on Derek, and we're going to talk about how Derek got attacked this week. Before we do that, though, I want to tell a story. And then the goal is, I don't know if I can do all this, the goal is then to bring it back to this slide right here, okay, and see if we can apply anything we've learned, which I might be I might be a little aggressive in what I'm hoping to do here. But what I want to do is I want to start with a story. 18 years ago, maybe, 20 years ago, I've been married for 23 years. And so early on in our marriage, and this is why I know it was probably 23 years ago, maybe a year, 2, 3 years into our marriage, my wife was working 2 jobs, actually. In fact, I was still going to college, working as much as I could. She was working at a parochial school, teaching 3rd grade. She was also working at night at a restaurant. So, you know, like kids, we're really doing everything we can to get school done and get work done, but not a lot of time for anything else. And we lived in this little 2-bedroom apartment. We literally went to garage sales and bought, I remember I don't mean to sound weird about this, but I do. I remember our coffee tables were egg carton crates that we turned over and put a cover over them. So this was back in the good old days. But here's what happened. It was a Friday night, and Jenny always worked at the restaurant on Friday nights. She usually worked Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, always, and sometimes even more, but usually it was always Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. And then what I would do on Friday nights is I wouldn't be working because I would usually be, my job, I was an accountant, and so I was going to school full time, but I was doing accounting, but usually that's not at Friday nights. So this Friday night, I decided I'm going to go home and I'm going to clean the entire house, okay? Which, to be honest with you, it wasn't much of a house. It was kind of a small apartment, but it was kind of a mess because, you know, we were living this kind of messy life. At the time, we didn't have any kids. So I'm going to try to paint the picture of this. So here's Derek, all right? Now, I've been warned not to, I'm going to try to make this in a way that doesn't get too many words on the screen. But right here we have what I call the circumstance, okay? So the circumstance here is that Derek cleaned the house. Okay, so Derek cleaned the house. Now, I went home and I cleaned the house, and we're going to do TEA right here. I try to be as careful as I can. So here's what I want to know, and somebody speak up, you know, Brent or Lisa or Chris or whatever, Derek. So I went home, I cleaned the house. I got this thing spick and span. I probably spent 3 or 4 hours cleaning this little tiny apartment, got everything going on. What do you think the natural reaction of my wife would be when she came home? How would she feel? Let's start with that.
Angry.
Okay. And what would you think she would naturally feel, Lisa, if I did this for her?
I think she would be thrilled.
Yeah, thrilled. Okay. Okay.
She might wonder if you're not feeling well, but I think she's
right.
thrilled.
And then, Lisa, if she was thrilled, what do you think that she was thinking that caused her to be thrilled?
That she doesn't have to clean it now, or you are being kind to her, helping her.
Yeah. She might say, "You are so kind." Okay. That might be what she's thinking, which she would then be saying, then she would be feeling thrilled. And of course, I was probably 24 years old at the time. Okay, so what was I hoping the action would be?
A little hand holding.
Yeah, I was going to go somewhere else, but I know there's a lot of people on the line.
Okay, a little
Lisa's.
hand holding. All right, I've never heard it called that before.
Family-friendly broadcasting here.
Okay, I've never heard it called that before, Chris, but we're going to say it's hand holding. So, now, honestly, I can honestly say I cleaned the house because it was an absolute mess, and I wanted to help Jenny out. But we're just going to go down this path for a second and say, you're so kind, thrilled. We sit on the couch and watch a movie and hold hands. All right. So.
What was the movie? Now,
Yeah.
if you watched a chick flick, then you were being very kind.
I am convinced that if Ashton Kutcher would have been the age he is now, then that would have been the movie to watch. But, of course, he probably wasn't even born then. So.
No.
All right. So here I am, clean the house. The thought is, you are so kind. The emotion is thrilled. The action could be a number of things. Could be hand-holding. Okay. However, when she walked into the house, instead of being thrilled, Brent already hit on it, she was extraordinarily angry. And in fact, her action that caused her to be angry, or I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The action that came from her anger was she looked at the house, she put down her purse, she walked into the bedroom, and she closed the door. And she may have locked it. I'm not exactly sure. But that's
there
what.
was no hand holding.
Yeah,
No
there was.
hand-holding.
Yeah, she didn't
Yeah,
come
that's
into the
obvious.
house. She didn't come into the house and go into the bedroom. She came into the house, stomped into the bedroom, and locked me out of it. So very different than this down here. Okay, so the question then is, what is she thinking?
She's thinking, I must be a bad wife, that you had to clean the house, or you didn't do it the way I wanted to. I wanted it done, but probably.
Yeah. She said, I'm not good enough. And she's saying to herself, I'm not good enough. She's feeling angry. And so then she goes and closes the door behind her. All right. So here's the challenge that I need to ask you. If I was going to pull this chart up again, well, let me ask you this. If you were Jenny right now, okay? Now bear with me. Act like you don't know anything about Lives Transforming for a second. If you were Jenny and you came home and you went into your bedroom, let's do this real quick. Let's try it. Lisa, you be Jenny and I will be me. Or I'm sorry, you be Jenny. I'm going to be a girlfriend that you're calling. So you're in the bedroom now, and you're very angry. I'm sorry. I'm going to try this one more time. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do the role play.
I think you should have Crispy Jenny.
Yeah, that would scare me. Yeah, that would scare me to death there. Okay, so Lisa, what I want you to do is I want you to put yourself in a position of being angry, okay? And put yourself in a position of not feeling good enough, not feeling like you're good enough. You're angry. You close the door and you call me, and you're calling me on your cell phone in the bedroom, and you're upset. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm going to ask. So now we're going to do a little quick role play. So so I say, "Oh, Jenny, it sounds like you're upset. What are you upset about?"
Dorica, I couldn't believe it. I was so mad when I came home. I was going to try to clean the house, but I didn't get to it, and it's like I can't ever do anything well enough. So he takes over, and I feel horrible anyway. I don't know how to do.
Oh,
It seems like I can't do anything right.
got you. So Derek made you mad.
Well, yeah. He could have at least asked me if I wanted help or something instead of just doing it.
Okay, let's stop right there. Okay. Now, you see, the natural response is Derek made me mad. But notice, One situation, she's mad. One situation, she's thrilled. Okay? So then, when she comes home and she's thrilled, am I the one that created the thrilling feeling in her? And did I really make her mad? See how confusing this gets? And this is what I want to tear apart tonight in the next 15 or 20 minutes. What's going on here? In this case, if she's happy and she says, Derek made me happy, then I get to say to myself, oh, look at me. I made her happy. Up here, if she says, you made me mad, then I've got to say what? Oh, that's horrible. I made her mad.
What's wrong with me?
What's wrong with me? But what's happening here is we're crisscrossing who's responsible for what. Okay? And this is what's critical. And this causes all kinds of consternation in relationships.
Constipation?
What word was that? That was not a...
Constipation, Derek?
No.
Yeah,
Okay. This causes all kinds of grief in relationships.
That's better.
Okay. And so because what's happening here is I, as the husband, if she gets mad, I could be thinking, oh my gosh, it was horrible for me to clean the house. I can't believe I did that. And then I could call my buddy up, and what would I say? I don't know what I did. Oh, it's horrible. And I'd be like, and then Brent, I'd call Brent and say, Brent, I did something horrible. And you would say what? You'd say, what did you do?
Well, what did you do? Yeah.
Yeah. And I go, I cleaned the house.
And say, what's wrong with that?
It's horrible. I should never have done it. I made my wife so mad. She closed the door and, see what I'm saying? And so, you see, what I'm trying to do is totally screw up your heads right now as you're watching this. And the reason I'm trying to do it is because I'm trying to show that this is such a messy thing. Because the problem is we start taking responsibility for things that we're not responsible for, and then we don't let other people take responsibility for what they are responsible for. So Jenny says, I'm responsible for her anger, and then I think to myself, well, maybe I am responsible for her anger. Maybe I'm the one that made her angry. And so over here, she's happy. Ooh, I'm the one that made her happy. And then if I just do more stuff, then I'm in control of her happiness. Then that means I got to keep trying harder to do more stuff because I have control of her happiness. That means if she's not happy, oh my gosh, I'm in control of her unhappiness now. And then she calls her girlfriends on the phone. Yeah, he didn't do this, but now I'm unhappy. He did do this, and now I am happy. So all of a sudden, you see how quickly we move into codependency. Because codependency is when my emotional life depends on something external to myself. That's a codependent relationship. Mm-hmm. Okay? So here, immediately, Jenny says, I'm angry because you made me angry. My emotion of anger is depending on something external of myself, you cleaning the house. Down here is just as bad of logic, though. She says, I'm thrilled. You make me happy. Now my emotional life is now dependent on something I did. This is codependence to the extent it's taken to the extent where my happiness depends on you. That's the definition of codependence. And you can see this is just a glimpse of it. I'm not saying this is a wholly codependent. I'm saying this is a glimpse of what that looks like in a relationship. Okay? Certainly I could clean the house, she could be happy, and we could have a healthy relationship. But we're seeing glimpses of codependence. When she comes home angry, I'm going to call my girlfriend, and I'm going to make him the reason why, and then I'm taking responsibility for her being angry. This is at the very, this is sentence 1, paragraph 1 of the codependency book of your marriage, is what I'm trying to say. Okay?
Well, Derek, I'd even back it up and say if your motive for cleaning the house had anything to do with wanting to get your hand held, right, or anything, then that's just as codependent.
Right. And so the important point here is this isn't just about looking at Jenny being codependent, but this is looking at the risk of me being codependent too. Okay?
Right.
All right. So we're going to come back to this story because now I'm going to get into the attack.
You say that with gusto.
Yes. I got to find the attack.
You know, while you're finding that, another great quote we used to talk about was, anytime my worth and value comes from what someone else thinks about me, guaranteed I will try and manipulate you 100% of the time to get my needs met.
Yeah.
That's kind of a good illustration.
Right, and you can see here how I'm trying, I could, first of all, I want to make it very clear. There's nothing wrong with cleaning the house. But if my motive is to clean the house in order to get my wife to do something, now I'm trying to manipulate her. This manipulation thing is all part of this codependent game, all right? Now, this is why we spend so much time on TEA, because this is ultimately what you have the ability to decide, to think, okay? And we'll get back to that in a second. Because Derek doesn't really have any control over the anger because the anger is coming from the thought. Jenny gets to choose what to think to cause her feelings to be what they are. Now, that's how we teach what I call personal responsibility. Okay? However, some of you may be thinking what this particular guy thought. We're going to call this guy Dean, in case I need to refer to him. Dean is the attacker, and he emails me, and he suggests that I am absolutely crazy. In fact, he starts the email with this, and I'll go ahead and put it up here. Is no one to blame for anything? Okay, now back to here. I'm suggesting Jenny's anger is coming from what she's thinking. Oh, so you're saying Jenny can't blame me even if I intentionally tried to manipulate her? It was obviously my manipulation. So if you're saying that that can't be the case, Derek, your theory must suggest that you can't blame anybody for anything. That's just nonsense. Okay, so that's the attack. And then here's the circumstance. And so Dean sends me a story, and he says this. He says, my wife purposely set a fire to my house.
Whoa. Whoa.
Okay. Now, this is a made-up story. Okay, this is a fictitious story. This isn't a true story. Dean's wife does not hate him this month, I don't think, but she actually may. I'm not sure.
Didn't Reggie Miller's wife do that? Was that?
I have no clue.
Maybe I've got my stories mixed up.
Don't, Lisa. You're giving away who Dean is.
Oh. Is Reggie Miller emailing you?
No, he's not emailing me. So, wife purposely set a fire to my house. He just makes up this story to try to prove that what I'm saying is all hogwash. And then he says, I run out of the house.
In his boxers.
Okay. And someone on the street stops me and says, why did you run out of the house? And then his comment is, because my wife set fire to the house and the smoke was poisoning me.
That statement of a fact is not blaming.
The person then would say, stop blaming your wife. You need to take personal responsibility for your own actions.
He did. He got out of the house.
Okay. So, here's the argument. Derek, you must be saying nobody's to blame for anything. So when I get angry because of something my husband did, you're telling me that that anger is coming from my thought. It's coming from me and not your husband, not my husband. So you must be meaning I can't blame him for anything. Back to slide 2. So, is no one to blame for anything? So then here's the setup. Your wife purposely sets fire to the house. You run out of the house. Someone on the street says, why'd you run out of the house? Because my wife set fire. You can't say that. You're blaming your wife. You can't blame your wife for that. You got to take personal responsibility. So let's dissect this. So here we have a scenario. And by the way,
Scenario or scenario?
I have no clue. By the way, this is critical. Understanding this concept is absolutely critical because, again, see this X? We're constantly crossing this up. I'm taking responsibility for you, you're taking responsibility for me, and it gets into an absolute wreck with these lies. Okay? So here's the scenario 1. Action. He ran out of the house. Why? What was the emotion he was feeling?
Fear. Fear,
Okay.
anger, fear.
Okay, good. Derek, are you still with me?
I am.
So what's the thought he's thinking?
His thought is, run away, get out.
Okay, why would he be thinking that?
Well, he's in
Put yourself in the...
danger of. I mean, a house is on fire.
Okay.
Why did my wife
The
do
thought
this?
is.
Yeah, he's
Is that
probably...
where you're going with it?
No, I wouldn't think he would be saying, why did my wife do this? What do you think he'd be thinking?
I'm going to die if I don't get out
Thank
of here.
you. Yeah, I'm going to die. I mean, if I got the house on fire, I'm going to be thinking, I'm going to die. All right.
Drop, stop, drop, and roll.
All right. So here's what's happening. I'm running out of the house because I'm feeling fear, which would be a logical thing to feel if the house is burning. My thought is, I'm going to die. Okay? Now, obviously, this is not an unreasonable thing to do. But here's the deal. You didn't run out of your house because your wife burned or started fire to the house. You ran out of the house because you thought, I'm going to die, and you don't want to die. So you ran out of the house. In fact, let's do this to prove this. Circumstance is exactly the same. The exact same circumstance occurs. Sorry, guys. Exact same circumstance occurs. The house is on fire. Okay? However, there's one difference, and that is your 3-year-old daughter is still in the house. Now, what are you thinking?
Gotta get her.
Yeah, your instinct takes over at that point.
Okay?
Or some instinct.
I would like to
You
think that...
still have fear and anxiety.
Okay, you're probably still doing that. But the thought is probably something like this. The love for my daughter overrides my desire not...
To live. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say not to die, but it's really better said to live. Good, Brant. Love for my daughter overrides my desire to live. See, that would have to be the thought, wouldn't it, if you go back into the house? So now, what's the emotion?
Compassion.
Well, there's still going to be anxiety.
There's certainly going to be anxiety. But
Yeah,
what?
there's a healthy fear. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is an overriding emotion. And the overriding emotion, I mean, there's nothing else that could possibly cause you to go into a house that's on fire without having an overriding emotion of love. Certainly there's going to be other emotions involved, all kinds of emotions involved. But clearly this has to be a very strong one. Okay? But honestly, it wouldn't matter for what we're talking about. You can add anxiety in here. You can add all kinds of other emotions in here and still get it right. There's all kinds of things that would be going on at this point. So there's no right or wrong answer. But we know love has got to be one of them or nobody would run back into a house. It's on fire. And so the action, of course, is...
opposite.
So his action is he runs into the house. Interesting. Now, if this theory is true, that why did you run out? Because my wife set the house on fire. Then if you ran into the house, see how confused I am? Because if my wife had control of me enough to force me out of the house, if she was the thing that I'm saying I run out of the house, she's to blame, then if I run into the house, can I say that? Can I say, if somebody says, why are you running into the house on fire? Well, I'm running into the house because my wife's making me run into the house because she set it on fire.
Yeah. What you're thinking.
There's something that doesn't line up with that, because it's really difficult to say that my wife is responsible for me running out of the house and my wife is responsible for me running into the house. How can she be responsible for both actions when they're opposite?
Now, Derek, someone might be looking at this and saying, well, because you're running into the house because of what your wife did, because your daughter's going to die.
Right. But then if the person,
Yeah,
if the same person ran out of the house,
breaking it down.
yeah, if the person ran out of the house, so which one is it? Is the wife responsible for him running into the house and out of the house?
That's what he's thinking about the situation at the time, what he
See,
knows.
my point is this. You can't make both of these choices. You have to make one or the other. So the woman can't be responsible for both of the actions that are opposite of each other. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You had to choose. And the choice that you made came not from her. The choice that you made came from your thought.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, I can't fully connect the dots here yet, but as soon as you said that love, the love for the daughter overrides the person's desire to live, it just takes us right to, we move away from blaming others to seeing them as Christ sees them, and we only can do that by the work of the cross in us. I mean, it just flatlines it.
Yeah, Derek, I would think that him saying, why are you running out of the house because my wife set it on fire, is like if I went and just beat up somebody and they said, why'd you do that? And I said, because the gas prices are outrageous.
Right.
That's the same thing. I mean, I am blaming something that leads me to do something else, that leads me to do something else. I mean, he just skips right ahead to, because my wife set the house on fire.
Absolutely.
Well, this is John 3:16.
Yeah.
Big
Yeah,
time.
it is. Metaphorically, it certainly is. So, here's the thing. Over here, we have basically a hypothesis that says the reason I'm running out of the house is because my wife forced me out of the house. But that does not hold up under scrutiny, because she didn't force you out of the house. You had to choose to run out of the house, because you could have also chosen to run into the house. Now, what Chris is saying is absolutely true. With this kind of logic, well, let's start with this. First of all, what do we know? Who's responsible for what? Okay, we've got the wife.
She's responsible for setting the fire.
She is absolutely 100% responsible for setting the house on fire. Okay? Now, so let's start right there. So what's the husband responsible for? The husband is absolutely responsible for his choice to either run out of the house or run into the house. Now, it seems obvious. I'm going to erase this for a second because I want to add one more thing to this. It seems obvious, doesn't it, that she is responsible for setting the house on fire?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But if we use the logic from back here, where we suggest that the wife is the cause of Dean running out of the house, then we could also suggest that she is responsible for setting the house on fire. No, that wouldn't be the case. The reason she set the house on fire is because the dog made her mad.
Or Dean made her mad.
Yeah, or Dean married her.
Okay.
That's his first problem.
And so you see what kind of what's kind of going on here is that is because maybe the husband got in the fight with her, and then now she's saying that he's the reason why she set the fire, and then they got in a fight over the dog, and now the dog's the reason why she set the house on fire. You see what's happening here?
Everybody's blaming.
It's total illogic. It's totally illogical. Okay. At the end of the day, there's only two things left. The wife is responsible for burning down or for setting the house on fire. The husband is responsible for choosing to go into the house or go out of the house. Okay. Now, this Dean took it one step further. Well, let me answer this question first. So, is no one to be blamed for anything? And then he went on to say, he says, well, I guess the way your logic would think that Madoff, the guy, Bernie Madoff, the guy out in New York, he stole all that money from those people. He should be let out of prison because, he shouldn't be blamed for it. It was their decision to give him the money, so he shouldn't be blamed for it. Well, that was another thing he put in the email, which is, again, totally illogical. That would be like saying that the wife should not go to prison for arson for putting the house on fire. Of course she's responsible for setting the house on fire. There's no question she's responsible for setting the house on fire. There's no question she should go to prison. There's no question Madoff should go to prison. Here's the issue. She's responsible for setting the house on fire, but she's not responsible for your action, your choice, your emotion from her setting the house on fire. Okay?
Yep. Man, that's hard when it comes down to these tough situations. That's hard.
But if we don't understand this who's responsible for who, we've talked about it many times, right? We come in here, we open up our Lives Transforming worksheet, we scroll down, and we see, oh, my internet's going slow, and we see these distortions, and these distortions look like, some, we've got these distortions down here that says blaming myself, the blaming myself distortion, darn. Blaming myself distortion, the blaming others deception, the emotional deception, which would be also into this, playing down a situation, playing up, all those things feed what we're talking about right here. Okay? When we get the responsibility out of whack, it causes havoc because we start believing lies that start freaking us out. Now, the key is knowing who's responsible for what. Okay, and we could go through tons of examples here. Okay, we'll go through some, no question about it. However, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Just one second. Okay, I think we're okay. Now, was that Chris again?
Derek, that would be similar. Yes, that would be, no, that's not me. This is all.
That was Lily. That was my dog.
Yeah, I thought that's what that was.
That was my dog shaking her ears.
Oh, very nice. Okay, Chris, go ahead.
Another scenario would be if a woman walks out from having an affair with someone else, and somebody sees her and says, "Why did you just have an affair?" She says, "Because my husband has been having an affair." So her actions are totally justified because he made me do this in a way.
Exactly.
So why did you do this? Because he did this.
Right. Now, when we understand how transformation occurs, as we know. In fact, let me pull up a different verse. I like this one. Is really. We're going to go to Romans chapter 8, but I just cannot remember the exact verse, so we're going to hit it in just a second here. Okay, 8 verse 5. Here. Whoa. New American Standard. Okay. For those who are according to the flesh set their minds on things of the flesh, but those who are according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For the mind set on the flesh is death, but the mind set on the Spirit is life and peace. Because the mind set on the flesh is hostile to God, etc. What we're talking about here is that the way we think is what moves us into the fleshly actions. The mindset on the things of the flesh move us to those fleshly things. Okay? Now, for instance, in this particular case, we have this affair. The wife is totally responsible for her decision to having the affair. And guess what? The husband is totally responsible for him having an affair. Neither one of them are responsible for each other having the affair. Each one of them chose it. Okay? So let's use another example. Okay? And this is a big one right now, all over the place. All right, so the husband's looking at porn, or it could be the wife, either one. Women looking at porn is growing at a faster rate right now than even husbands looking at porn. So husband looking at porn. Okay. It's very easy for a woman here to blame herself. But here's the deal. She's not responsible for him looking at the porn. Oh yeah, I'm not good looking enough. Okay? So this would be her blaming herself. The truth is, though, she's not responsible for him looking at the porn. The husband is responsible for looking at the porn. But let me take it one step further. What is the woman responsible for? The woman is responsible for the way she responds to the husband looking at porn. Now look at how nasty this gets. The husband is responsible for looking at porn, but the husband wants to say, I'm looking at porn because my wife never has sex with me. Or there could be many other reasons. But this is one way in which a husband could be blaming the wife, and then accordingly the wife takes on that blame and starts to go, oh well, maybe it is my fault. Maybe he had an affair because I wasn't meeting his sexual needs. Going back to the affair situation that we just talked about. Okay? We got to get the responsibility right. If we talk to a woman here, though, the woman could easily say, look, I am totally, what happened last night? I took a knife to my husband. Okay, now that's an extreme example. But then you would say, why did you do that? Because he was looking at porn, and I'm upset. I'm angry. So, who's responsible for what? When the woman takes on the blame for the husband looking at porn, we've mixed it up. When the woman assigns the blame for her rage to the husband, we've also messed it up. When the husband is looking at the porn and doesn't take responsibility for it, he messes it up. And when he blames the wife for him looking at porn, he also messes it up. Do we see this?
Hey, Derek, take a look at that. Number 2, what you put on the woman. Give 2 different responses, healthy responses, of what she could do in that situation.
Okay. Well, one response would be a skillet over the head, and this would be Wayne Jacobson's wife's response.
I said healthy, okay.
Oh, healthy. Healthy responses.
I didn't mean healthy food. You could be doing eggs in there, but yeah.
Okay.
Healthy responses.
Well, there's 2 unhealthy responses that I normally see happen out of this. One is internal, and one is external. So the internal response that some women have, and usually it's based on their personality. It's not like it's kind of a random thing in that it's a personality driven. It seems like half the women I would coach, or I've coached, they internalize the fact that the husband's looking at the porn, and they actually feel guilty for it, okay? And then out of that guilt, they respond in a way, whatever that unhealthy action would be out of that guilt. Something like trying to force themselves to have sex with their husband even though they don't like it, or they don't comfortable with it, or something is not going, you know what I mean? And then they feel like that I've actually heard women say this, it feels like I'm prostituting myself to my husband because we don't know each other, we don't care about each other, and he wants me to have sex with him. And so that's kind of what the unhealthiness looks like if it's internalized. Okay? Now, the external over here would be, I'm never talking to you again. Okay? That would be an example of, I'm never talking to you again. If you're doing that, then that must mean that's horrible, and I can never live with that again. Never live with you. You do something that's sinful. I'm never talking to you again. Okay, well, not a lot of biblical basis for somebody being unhealthy and doing something that's sinful and then Jesus never talking to them again. So those would be two pretty strong unhealthy responses, and so all you have to do to find something that looks a little more healthy would be to go the opposite direction. So I know you asked for something healthy, Brent, but I think we get to healthiness by juxtaposing the unhealthiness. And so here, instead of having guilt, you wouldn't have any. There would be no guilt. In fact, internally, you wouldn't feel guilty at all. You wouldn't be feeling condemned at all by this. And so your feeling towards yourself would be pretty much like peace, because whatever, you don't feel condemned. You feel okay about yourself. And out of that okayness would come an action that wouldn't look like, quote, like this one woman said, prostituting yourself to your husband. You wouldn't move towards that unhealthy action. You would move towards a healthy action, which would be not doing that. Externally, however, if you never talk to them again, something that would look like healthiness would look like something that says, you know what, I'm not going to take this personally. I'm certainly not going to take blame for it. But at the same time, rage, being rageful about it, is going to come from something I'm thinking. So that's my responsibility. And if I'm not thinking something that's moving me towards there, and instead I'm moving towards something that says this: doing something unhealthy is coming from an unhealthy emotion that's coming from an unhealthy thought. Go back to this for a second. Right? Doing something unhealthy comes from an unhealthy emotion that comes from an unhealthy thought. So a healthy response would be, okay, my husband is doing something unhealthy. He must be experiencing some sort of unhealthy emotion that's causing him to do that. He must be experiencing a thought that's causing his emotion to move towards that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to understand what my husband is thinking and feeling, what's happening in his life, to better understand him, to try to move towards figuring out what's going on. That would be something that would come out of a feeling of compassion as opposed to a feeling of rage. Okay?
Getting into their world.
Derek,
Absolutely.
now, Derek, take it one more notch below, because, I mean, I think these are the dynamics that start happening. So a woman is able to be detached enough, is able to be secure enough in her own worth, and recognizing that what's going on, it's not about her, and trying to follow it back and be compassionate for him. So she enters into the discussion, tries to get into his world, and he says, well, it's because you're not doing blah, blah, blah. So at that point, keep it going.
Yeah.
How does she respond?
I mean, she can simply respond by, I mean, you know, how a healthy person would respond to that would simply to say, you know, personally, I can see how you would think that you could blame me for this. I can certainly understand that. However, I believe that you chose to look at this porn because you chose it. I don't have any control over you, whether you do it or not. I can't make you stop. I can't make you start. I can't make you look at it longer. I don't have any control over you doing that. And I would honestly explain that position. Now, he may not agree with you, but that doesn't mean that you give in to what you believe. And so you just healthily respond. Yeah, you just healthily respond to it. Now remember, we can do this in a number of different, we can do this with everything, okay? And so any scenario, I mean, we use that, we use the affair kind of thing. We're using extreme examples. See, I realize that we're using these extreme examples, and for the most part, you know, not every day are both parties having an affair. That's an extreme example. Or
burning down houses.
Not every day are we burning down houses, but by trying to use these extreme examples, we're trying to, you know, hopefully it's easier to see in the non-extreme examples. It's easier to even get your hand around, because if it can work in the extreme, it ought to be able to work in the whatever the opposite of extreme is, the mundane. Okay, so now we come back to clear back here. Okay, all right. We already talked about this one, sort of. Betrayed. I can't trust my spouse. So I'm feeling betrayed because my spouse did something. All right. Now we're getting into the, you know, we're getting into the nuts and bolts of it. The answer is no. Your feeling of betrayal is coming from something you think. So let's do this one. Betrayed. I can't trust my spouse. So we're going to head to a new slide here.
And Derek, one of the comments that came up on the screen too was, hey, wait a second, when you got married, you were supposed to become one flesh. And you hear that when you work with enough people. Wait a second, I thought we were one flesh. That betrayal comes from, I felt like he broke that covenant.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting at all. Well, let's just do this. Let's just do this. I think it'll become. Ask the question again if we don't solve it right here, okay, Brent?
Sure.
All right. So the emotion is betrayal, okay, and the thought is I can't trust my spouse. And I'm going to finish this sentence. I have no idea who this is. It could be I can't trust my spouse because he spent all our money. I can't trust my spouse because, he treats my kids bad. There's a lot of reasons not to trust your spouse, but we're going to say I can't trust my spouse because he had an affair. Okay. The natural tendency is to believe that, and we're going to do this right here, and then we'll try to end up tonight with this because we're running out of time. Over here, I could say my emotion is betrayal, and the reason I'm feeling betrayed is because my husband had an affair. So I'm going to blame my husband for my feeling of betrayal. Okay? Here's the thing. There's so much freedom in what I'm about to say. You aren't the reason for your husband having an affair. He didn't betray you. He betrayed himself. He betrayed his own conscience. He is not, you aren't the issue here. It's his issue. His affair is his issue. So, when you say, I feel betrayed, you're giving him power that's not necessary. And this is an extreme example. That's why I'm going after it. So here's the thing. Figure out what that thought is. If the thought is a healthy thought, which is, look, I don't want to get, I am married, I love my husband. But here's what a healthy thought would look like in a situation like this. I have no control over what my husband does, number one. He made the choice to have an affair. Now remember back to this other slide. You get to choose what you do next. So, if you're feeling betrayed, it's because, now this is hard to hear, all right? So whoever is I'm talking to right now, I'm just giving you a heads up. This is going to be very difficult to hear. But at this moment, you have got to lean totally into the fact that it is God and God alone who creates your value. When your husband went and had the affair, which is totally his responsibility, not yours, when he went and had that affair, that has nothing to do with you. Your value, your worth, it does not make you any less of a person. You are totally complete already. So, if that's the case, you can literally think to yourself, my husband is having an affair. Why is he doing this unhealthy action? Because he's feeling something that's unhealthy. And why is he? Because he's thinking something that's unhealthy. He's thinking something, I can tell you one of the things he's thinking, this other person is going to make me happy. That in and of itself goes completely against everything we're talking about tonight. No one else can make you happy. He's bought into that lie. The enemy has lied to him. He's bought into it. He then has an emotion that moves him into, which this usually comes from some sort of unhealthy envy or desire, that moves him into this very unhealthy action of an affair. Okay? But here's the deal. It's because he was thinking something that wasn't true. He was buying into it. Yes, Brent. The
perfect verse. Pull this up real quick. I know we're at the end here, but Galatians chapter 5, this is out of the Message, about verses 7 through 9. And I know you know this one well, because this is kind of how the deceit happens and the personal responsibility we have. There it is.
Okay, you were running superbly. Who cut in on you, deflecting you from the true course of obedience? This detour doesn't come from the one who called you into the race to the first place. And please don't toss this assignment off as insignificant. It only takes a minute of yeast, to permeate an entire loaf. Okay, this detour did not come from the one who called you into the race. This detour of this man came from the enemy. This
and the
man.
minute, sorry.
Go ahead.
And that minute amount of yeast, that's all it takes to permeate an entire loaf of bread. That's that little lie mixed in there.
That's exactly right. See, here's the thing. No, there is no amount of, quote, betrayal that can occur for you to feel betrayed, because your essence, your worth, your entire person does not depend on whether some other man goes out and has an affair. Your entire worth, your entire value, your entire life does not have any, the dependence doesn't depend on what he does.
And even the end of that verse, I've never really looked at that in verse 10. Deep down the master has given me confidence that you will not defect, but the one who is upsetting you, whoever he is, will bear the divine judgment. Again, the personal responsibility on that person for their own poor choices.
Exactly. Now, this is very difficult. When someone has had an affair, for you to be detached, what do I mean by that? For you not to get your value and worth from that person, what will happen? Lisa, I'm going to ask you this. When you stop connecting your value as a woman, a wife, and a mom to your husband, and instead connect who you are to God and He in you, your value as a wife, a mom, and a woman to God in you, does the feeling of betrayal go down or up?
Yeah, it goes down.
It goes down. The feeling of betrayal goes down. When you understand he's thinking unhealthy thoughts that's causing him to think, to feel a way that's totally unhealthy, ridiculous passions is what Romans 1 would say, moving him into affair, all of a sudden, as ridiculous as it sounds, this feeling of betrayal moves to compassion. That does not mean we want him to have the affair, but it means I don't have to live in this horrible feeling of betrayal because he's not the one that makes or breaks me. Now, the reason I'm asking Lisa this, and the reason why whoever said this, I hope is still on the webinar and not already shut the webinar off, because this is difficult to think through. But the reason I'm asking Lisa to answer this is because this is Lisa's story. This is exactly what happened to Lisa. Lisa's husband had an affair. Lisa felt betrayed when I first met Lisa 3 years ago, and she came into my office. And one of my questions to her is, do you want to get rid of the feeling of betrayal? Because quite frankly, the feeling of betrayal leaves you empty. The feeling of betrayal is a horrible feeling to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And what I'm suggesting is, in this moment, your value, your worth, what that man does is irrelevant to who you are. The betrayal can go down. Lisa, is there any other way I can say that to make it more clear?
No, I think it just provides a level of relief and comfort and peace, and it causes you to lean into that truth. And I think what struck me from the earlier slide is when you then start realizing what they must be thinking, your compassion goes up, and then you really start to understand the work of the cross.
Yeah.
You really understand two pieces. One, that you're fully complete because of it, and two, that you can learn to love unconditionally because of it.
Now, the thing of it is, though, what I'm trying to say here is the benefit, the payoff is huge, because living in compassion is a place that's an enormous, living in peace and compassion is a place that's a lot more fun to live in than betrayal. And by the way, betrayal is going to lead you to actions that are completely unhealthy. On the one hand, you want to take a knife to him, certainly understandable, but probably going to land you in prison. The second thing that the feeling of betrayal is going to lead you to do could be something even worse, which is go after him. What do I mean by that? I mean, sell your soul. I'll do whatever you want. Obviously, I did something wrong. I need you back. I want you to come back. I must have done something wrong. Come back to me, please. See what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Both
that's
of
not
those,
loving.
They're the opposite action, but they both come from betrayal, and they're both unhealthy. A healthy response would probably, normally anyways, look like, let's say this guy's name's Dave. It would look like saying something like this: Dave, you chose it. You chose her. If that's what you want, it's your choice. That sounds like something that's healthy. It's your choice. It's not my choice. I'm not going to take a knife to you, because ultimately, my value as a woman, my value as a wife, my credibility as a mom, my credibility as a wife does not come from you. It comes from God. So what you do, I'm sorry, but it's not going to impact me. I'm not going to let it impact me, because I'm not responsible for your actions. You are. Okay.
Yeah.
I know this is difficult. Let's take a few seconds to unwind here. And I can say it over and over again. It's so difficult to land in this in such highly volatile emotional environments. Okay. Chris, are you still there?
Yep, I sure am.
All right. Anything to add to this? Maybe clarify?
I just think it's so incredible, because I just, dealing with people that are so enraged at one of these spouses for having an affair, and how they're, Derek, I don't know, it just kind of opens up some more cans of worms, but of them yelling at the spouse, and don't you ever see that person again, and I'm going to follow every email that you have, and you can't be trusted. I want to run through every text message you have. You bring your phone home to me, and it just runs and runs and runs. And so what they're trying to get is not freedom at all. It just is more. It's just more of a mess.
Yeah, and you can just and what you're saying, of course, you and I have both counseled enough marriages that we've heard that over and over again. But here, think about it. If you're the woman in this case, let's call you Mary. If you're Mary in this case, no, I'm not going to call you Mary. The woman in this case is Mary. Now, think about that, Mary. If you are the woman in this case, think about what you're putting yourself through when you're doing that. It's eating you alive, and what God has for you is freedom. He has you freedom from betrayal, freedom from checking every text, freedom from needing your husband to come back to you to feel good, freedom from taking a knife to your husband, even though you feel like doing it. This freedom, in Galatians chapter 5:1, Christ has set us free to live a free life. That's the life that he's talking about, that kind of freedom. Thanks so much, Chris, for that. Derek Mattinger, anything to add?
Oh, sorry, real quick.
Go ahead, Brent.
No, I was going to say there was a question from the attendees. That was from Steve. He had a question.
Go ahead.
Steve,
yeah,
you there?
Steve.
Yeah, it wasn't really a question. I was just making the assumption that if my wife and I clean the house together, there's a good chance that it won't catch on fire. Is that what you're telling me? So I was sitting here thinking how, if what I'm thinking is that my worth depends or is conditional on somebody else or some other thing, I immediately set myself up. I mean, I'm starting in the deep end of the pool when I haven't really learned how to swim. If I'm thinking about the fruits of the Spirit as a guide, my whole mental attitude changes toward things. And I don't know if I could be as confident if I were going through a difficult, extreme situation. But I've seen it work in daily things that I run into, so I know that it works.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of making that comment. It does have a track record that's good.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. It is. Who are we to? Derek Mattinger. Yeah.
Yeah, the insanity of what we're talking about here tonight, and maybe this brings it down to a little more simpler level, is that when something bad happens to me, I want to blame somebody else.
Yeah.
Yet when something bad happens to somebody else, I blame them.
Yes.
It's their fault.
That's exactly right.
I think we see that in all of the examples you gave tonight. And just a little thought, maybe for another call, talking about healthy boundaries. We're looking at this affair business,
Yeah.
and that gets pretty nasty.
Right.
And you kind of spoke to it a little bit. with your response. But I'd like to hear a little bit more about that sometime. That's all I got right now.
Yeah. Well, I'll just add one quick thing to what you're saying is healthy boundaries can happen right here. See, you can say things like, you've chosen to be with her, then unfortunately you're going to have to move out and live with her because you've chosen. See, but over here, if I'm in betrayal, I got to live in anger, rage. I got to live with. I got to want to pick up a knife. I've got to want to go after him and try to keep him in the house, or I want to kick him out for the wrong reasons. You know, I'm not setting healthy boundaries. Instead, I would say, you need to get your butt out of here, and I'm going to try to, make sure you never see the kids. I mean, we've heard it all. But my point is that healthy boundaries come out of this side of the equation. Okay, go ahead. Where are we at, Lisa?
Yeah, I would just, say that it offers detachment and freedom. And I would also say that it doesn't mean that you don't grieve over, what's taken place. I think grieving is normal and healthy, but that's very different from self-contempt or other-centered contempt that comes from betrayal. It's two different processes.
Yeah, in fact, yes, absolutely. I mean, grieving is extremely important and extremely, I don't know how to say it. It's critical. It's absolutely critical, that process. There's nothing wrong with the grieving process of losing anybody important in your life. Back around now to Brent. Go ahead.
Yeah, when Eve ate the forbidden fruit, Adam blamed her. She blamed the serpent. Well, you and I talked about this, Derek, but yet God held each one of them personally responsible for their actions.
That's right. And, ultimately, when we make unhealthy decisions like burning a house down, we're going to be held accountable for arson. When we make an unhealthy decision and we have an affair, we're going to be held accountable for that affair. Now, Mary isn't going to be able to hold Dave accountable for it. God can handle that without Mary's help. But ultimately, God knows exactly what he's doing, and he's taking care of it. So that's it. I know we are way over. Tough stuff, though, to get through, and I just hated to stop in the middle of working through this. I hope it was beneficial. At the same time, I know it stretched many of you, and this particular night we went a little further. We stretched the way we're thinking quite a bit further than we have in the last couple of months. We'll come back to this topic again at a future date without question. But here's what I'm asking for you tonight. Some of you may be in some ways offended by some of the things that I've said. It may have made your stomach curl at times to think that there's possibly a different way of looking at this. There's times that the enemy might have put in your head something like, oh, so you're saying that Dave should just get by with having the affair? And of course that's not what I'm saying. What I'm suggesting is that Mary doesn't have to live in the feeling of betrayal, the feeling of worthlessness that comes from betrayal any longer. You don't have to stay there any longer. That's the thing. And of course I'm also saying that there is no such thing as Dave getting by with it. We live with a God of the universe that is sovereign. God takes care of that. We can be sure of whatever that looks like. There are consequences for our actions, and those actions are going to happen to Dave. Because why? Because God loves Dave too.
Yeah, it's really
absolutely
important to remember.
Yeah.
Okay, Brent, if you'll pray, and then email me, you guys. I don't know, Brent, is anybody left on the
next week,
webinar, or is everybody gone?
God, thank you so much for your truth. It's difficult sometimes because we tend to want to look out the window and blame someone else rather than look in the mirror. And every time we do that, it just muddies up the waters. When we take personal responsibility for ourselves and we walk in your truth, yes, we may be sad, we may grieve, those are okay, but we're not going to have all that anger and fear and all that stuff the enemy wants us to experience. So Lord, help us to take a careful exploration of who we are and the work we've been given and to pour ourselves into that. Teach us how to be empathetic listeners and compassionate at the same time. Understand that other people's choices are their choices. Help us to look at ourselves, make the right choices that you're calling us to make every day, God. And thank you for this truth. And God, just teach us every single day how to walk in that light. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Thanks for your
John
feedback, guys.
Thanks, Derek.
Thanks, Derek.
See you guys next week.
See you guys.